Who should I ask next? Who do you think is good to ask next?
So you asked me this question ahead of time, and I got to be honest, I forgot the two names, but there's the Mob Mentality podcast folks. And what I really like is how they put this, what in my head, the next level from pair programming to mob programming and ensemble programming. And they're doing such a great job at popularizing, explaining the value of a whole team working on together at the same time. So it like when we tried it in past company, it blew my mind in a way that like the effect that it has on the team, again, on the well-being, on the understanding, on the social cohesion of the team, but also on the technical level that like knowledge is shared, we learn from each other. So definitely, there are interesting people to talk to on that subject.
I like that. I like that, and I forgot to write down the names as well. So it's a bad preparation in that side. But yeah, it's what they're discussing, and indeed, there is so much more to learn in ensemble programming. And I recognize that I'm still working sometimes with clients that struggle with pairing and how that brings, even though I would say almost our full environment and everybody around. Policemen are working with two. If you're looking in television, there's definitely always two presenters on the radio. There's two. So in many things, we're working with two, and still in IT, it's sometimes hard to sell it. And now we're in IT, we're going a step beyond with ensemble programming. And I hear the same thing every time again, that teams at first they're like, well, let's try for whatever reason, and let's do it for the hard stuff or when we work with new stuff, and then it blows people's minds. And then very quickly, the teams that dare to try it will just do it full time because there's so much knowledge sharing, so much better quality, and they're delivering much more, which is very strange for a lot of people to learn, and that is indeed good to share much more. So thank you for inviting them, and we'll get to that. Hi, today I'm talking with Chris Lucian and Austin Chadwick. We talked about the coupling between fun and effectiveness, valuing work-life balance, and the positive influence mob or ensemble programming has on it. Actually, we talked a lot about positive impact that ensembling has. I'm Yves Hanul from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button, because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it. Hello, and hello everyone. With me, I have Austin and I have Chris. And let me show you a little. I wanted to show it in a different kind of way. I'm not sure if this is going to work. So I'm here in Belgium, and Google Earth is going to look up for me. So that's me there in Belgium, and then I'm going to ask Google to go back to where both of you are, and that's of course in the United States, and it's somewhere there. I said ocean side, and I think Chris, you're somewhere in the neighborhood as well, if I'm correct.
Yep. Right on.
So
cool.
let's bring me back on screen as well. We jumped into that, and one of the other questions I asked is that's the location, but what's the time zone? On my side, it's 17:15, something like that, and on your side, what time is it at this moment?
It's either -7, -8, something like that.
Yeah, so we see we're not just a lot of miles and kilometers apart, but also a lot of time zones apart. So that's how we roll these days with these kind of things. So that's kind of nice to do these things. So, but we jumped right into that. Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit? And I just for clarity, in here, I'm not going to say Austin first or Chris first. I assume that you guys will figure that one out, who will start first. So,
Go ahead, Austin.
All right, right on. Yeah, my name is Austin Chadwick. I've been in software engineering about 15 years. And so I mean, I feel like my first 5 years were in like a heavily waterfall shop. And then I did like 5 years of Scrum. And then I've been doing coming up almost on 5 years of very, in my opinion, lean, extreme programming and mob programming. And I've always enjoyed my career, but I think the enjoyment and effectiveness and just good times I've had with teams producing stuff has grown in each of those phases. And just have a lot of fun, working with teams, making good products and continuous improvement. How about you, Chris?
Yeah, thanks. So my background is very similar to Austin's. Just been in the industry for quite a while now. And then, the whole mob programming thing happened. And then we also started hosting the Mob Mentality Show podcast as well, talking about mob programming specifically. It's been a great ride. Went from very...
That's the show, right?
Yes, that's the show. Yep. You go and find that. And, just went from really inefficient to finding new and better ways of doing things as we go. And it's been awesome. So happy to be here.
Well, thanks for both of you to be here, and thanks to Patrick Dubois for inviting both of you. And it's really interesting that you say, well, when you talked about having fun, before even jumping into the other questions, is that an important part of you to have fun on the job? Because that's something So is that important for you?
Yeah, I worked with a guy, and he hated programming, but he became a software engineer. Like he hated his job. He hated every moment of it. And basically just got into the industry for money. And like, I just kind of fundamentally believe, you shouldn't, do things that you don't like to do for work, So that's kind of the concept of the Japanese concept ikigai, right? So it's like which means like good life. It's this idea of your the alignment of what you do and the and what you enjoy doing and what you do for work and make money with. If they're aligned, then you can achieve this kind of state of bliss. So maybe Austin, what do you have?
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, I think it's the same for me. I think it's all connected, and it doesn't mean that there are times where it doesn't require grit and hard work and things that are tough. And often the two go together. Overcoming that with the team often leads to joy. And so, but I think there's a close synergy to, I don't know, I haven't been on a team that's having fun but not being effective. I've seen it in work and even growing up in school and sports and things like that. There's always been a tight coupling between fun and effectiveness. So.
Yeah, I think we learn a lot when we're having fun. Children learn a ton by playing, and they don't always realize it. And I think there is indeed a lot there. It's interesting that you mentioned that. Yeah. I also worked with a colleague who totally didn't like programming. She got into it for the money as well, and she ended up going. In the end, I left her, or I left that company years before. But I heard later on that she started working as a cashier in a shop, and she actually liked it much more, making a lot less money, but having much more fun in her life. And I think like, okay, then that's, and it's actually good for a lot of her colleagues, because sometimes working with her was not fun either, because even if we explained some really better ways of doing it, she was like, yeah, I think I understand, but let's keep working in the old way because I don't want to change my habits. I'm just like, yeah, but okay. that was kind of hard sometimes, so I do understand that part. Anyway, we jumped right into that. Let's start with that first question. That what is something people usually don't know about you, but has influenced you in the way you are?
I'll have you go first this time, Chris.
Oh, geez. From the I have a pretty deep interest in game design. I played a lot of video games as a kid, and so and then later on in life, I've read a lot of game design books and things along those lines, and that I think has heavily, I like combining concepts from, maybe the agile space or whatever else I happen to be doing, parenting or whatever. And I like to, personally, I think something that's deeply ingrained into me that I just do kind of naturally is I take concepts from maybe two very different things I'm doing and combine them and merge them into one idea. And so, if I'm doing agile software development, but and doing retrospectives, then I might bring that home with me and do that at home. Or if I'm studying game design and kind of the theory of motivation and interest, and then incorporate that into the daily lives of the family, that sort of thing. So so I'm kind of I like to synthesize disparate concepts into a single idea and bring it forward, and so there's lots of little influences from all over the place that I have brought into my own both work life and personal life often, and a lot of that is expressed out of the video game design and game design theory, as well as like all the agile concepts and merging those two together. So, and I really enjoy that sort of thing.
And when you bring these things home, how is that for your family? Do they always like that you bring retros at home and stuff like that?
It sometimes comes in different formats, and so sometimes you have a very informal version of a retro, not bringing out the sticky notes and things like that. But I think when we do things like incentive structures or reflecting and changing something for the better, or a bright spot analysis, I think those things go over as well as they do in kind of any other situation. There's often adoption, sometimes resistance, but in the end, it kind of always it always is a Kaizen activity. It's always kind of getting one step better, which is the goal.
Which is interesting. Okay, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, and for me, very similar answer in that a lot of blending and worlds colliding is something I love to do, and I get made fun of for it. So these stickies I carry them around everywhere, and my family makes fun of me, but all in good fun. Yeah, similar thing. I mean, as far as influences that people may not know, kind of tying into family stuff again. So mob programming is, we will probably talk more about later, but the idea of lots of people synchronously working, on the code at the same time and same place, same computer, even if remotely kind of thing. But what's interesting is almost everything I do in life is paired with my wife. So she is like my advisor on everything. And so a lot of what I do, it's even happened in front of other people where I'll say something like it's my own idea, and then later I'll be like, oh, that's right, you said that, and I'll say it as if it were my own idea. And so I feel like my whole life largely influenced by my wife, and just so many good things have come from that. And another big thing that people may not know that influences me a lot is, like Chris, I read a lot of contemporary works, whether it's lean, whether it's agile, and business, technology, all that kind of stuff. But another big thing of worlds colliding is kind of classical and ancient thoughts and philosophy and stuff, and that combining with the newer concepts, and how much synergy there is, or how much a lot of new stuff is just old stuff rehashed, and combining that kind of stuff with education, so tight feedback loops in product development. Well, tight feedback loops when you're educating your own kids is also really good, and so things like that. So
I like what you say about rehashing history. I remember going to a first Agile conference with my father back in 2004. I asked him to join me because I wanted to create a game with him. And when we drove back, he told me like they're making all the same mistakes that we made in the 80s and the 70s with Gestalt groups and stuff like that. And was like, okay, we're doing exactly similar things, and we think we're inventing stuff, but we could learn from things that happened in 20 years ago or even more. So I like that you say that you like to read and learn from these, so it can avoid you making these kind of mistakes, because you can you can learn from what was done years ago. And we should do much more about that in our industry, I think. Not just in the Agile industry, but in IT in general. That's a lot there, I think, is there to learn. If we can go on for probably hours just talking about how similar, I don't know, mainframe and now other kind of development is and other kind of things. So but let's not jump too much into detail. So let's go to that next question. If you had not been to IT, what do you have any idea what would have become of you?
Oh man, for me, well, it was funny. My journey into computer science almost was an accident. I was at one point in college. College is a very formative year, but I became really passionate about philosophy, and so I was going to go do a major in philosophy, and maybe go into teaching, or maybe math, or maybe a pastor or something like that. And then, but I was like, but I'm getting married and probably need to be able to afford life, at least for a little while. And I'm like, this computer class was really fun. Let's do more of that. And so did a 180 switch to get my computer science degree. But really, really enjoyed it, and, kept doing it, and been doing kind of the philosophy stuff on the side. So probably somewhere in that camp for me, if not doing software. How about you, Chris?
Wait! I want to jump a little bit into that, because what I heard you say is you actually started into IT also for the money. Is that what I heard? How you started it?
Yeah, that's kind of how it started. To be honest, I was like, this is fun, and I think I remember sitting in the library at my college. I forget where the information came. I think I was like researching, and it was just like, this computer class was fun, and look at this, the market prospect is good for this. So it was a combination of the two, but
But you end up doing it a lot, or liking it a lot. So it's not just for the money, I think, anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I interrupted. Chris, now it's up to you.
So back in high school, my two biggest passions were playing video games and drama, acting. Being in plays and or doing like backstage lighting. And so in college, I did have to make the decision of whether to go into computer science or acting. And I felt like so there was always there was the money consideration in there as well, but I felt like I just enjoyed writing code more in the end than I did acting. But acting is another passion of mine, but I haven't really pursued it since I'm a very focused very focused in that. But and then beyond acting, I think there was another period of time where I decided, do I go into the corporate world or the game design world? And I felt like I valued the ability to have like a regular work-life balance. And if people are unfamiliar with the game industry, the the work-life balance typically is very poor in the game industry for most companies. And so I chose software development over acting because I actually decided I liked writing code more than I enjoyed acting. And then when I decided between game design and corporate work, it was more along the lines of having a good focused work-life balance and not being in an environment that was toxic. And I felt like I had a better chance of achieving that in the corporate world.
Interesting. And in the just as a side note, in the acting world, do you have any idea how the work-life balance would have been there? Do you have any idea there?
Well, I think that when you're preparing for a performance, it's all consuming. So it's very fits and starts for sure. But I think it's different in the sense, when you're trying to memorize something or convey a particular emotion, or you're preparing for a production, whatever it might be, backstage or on stage, you're going to have a lot of investment in these short-term bursts. And I think in the game industry there's something similar where they have crunch time and there, but you hear too much of these shops that maybe have the regular is 80-hour work weeks, not just the crunch. And so so acting would have been very different, but I think that where I've landed is a very solid work-life balance alongside a very satisfying work, which has kind of been my goal all along.
And well, maybe I want to link it also a little bit to what both of you are passionate about the mob programming or the ensemble or the teaming, whatever people are calling it these days. Do you think it has any influence on your work-life balance? Does that make a difference?
Oh yeah, hugely so. I mean, I think so. My experience was I went from a shop that wasn't mob programming, and we were swimming in, let's say, hundreds of bugs or so constantly. And then I went to mob programming, and that went to near zero, maybe not 100% of the time, but a large majority of the time. Very high quality, very high release frequency, very low bug count. And the ability to maintain work-life balance is much easier when the quality is high. And then also with mob programming, it's continuous knowledge sharing built in. So I just took 16 days off and had no worries at all because the mob I was on, everyone has context and has the ability to pick it up. And there are people who've worked on that product in the past, working in other mobs. So if they need help, they just pull those people in, and so there's context all around. And then also with mobbing comes a lot of practices like test-driven development and domain-driven design, where a lot of the context is put into the code, so you don't have to just know it in your head. So I found work-life balance is much easier with mob programming. What's your experience, Chris? Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I keep asking questions.
I was really intrigued by one of the things you said, because you talked about the holiday. What I noticed in a lot of teams is when people go on holiday, it might still work, but there might be preparation about, okay, I need to spread my knowledge about some of the things I've been working on. From what you said, I kind of heard that we didn't even have to prepare for that. I just take holidays and everybody knows everything. Is that the correct interpretation of what you said?
Yeah.
One of the lofty goals that we have for our department is anyone can take a vacation at any time, 0 silos. So this is the idea that no knowledge is siloed as a core tenet of what we do.
Yeah, that's what I always hear, and this is why I wanted to ask the question, because I think so many people undervalue that, and it's not just holidays. I think people might fall sick. I remember one person I worked with that was really a real silo, like you just said, Chris, that he had all the knowledge and everything was in that person's head. And he first fell ill for I think a flu or something. So a week or two really down, so really hard, not being able to work. And when he came back, he just lost his father. So basically he had to take 2 or 3 weeks off to take care of him because he was the only son. So he really had to take care of all the paperwork and everything. So yeah, shit happens. And then he was scheduled for a 2 week holiday. So basically, he had 6 weeks unprepared that he was off. And that was the end of the year. And then, of course, they couldn't deliver something they wanted to deliver for that had been planned for so many months. And then people said, yeah, we're just bad luck. And it was like, yeah, you're bad luck, but you're not set up to deal with that. If you don't work in silos, you don't have that kind of problem. That's basically what you say, Chris and Austin, that if your department is set up like this, it doesn't matter if people fall away for whatever reason.
Yeah. And we, we do something that I like to call chaos engineering for the teams, where it's basically proving that, right? So, Netflix talks about bringing down availability zones so that they can prove that their infrastructure is resilient to hardware failures. Well, we do the same thing. We move people around. No one can stay on the same product for more than 2 years out of the last 3 years. We move people around to make sure that there's resiliency to the knowledge on the team. And so we do this in different ways, shuffling and moving and randomizing to make sure that knowledge gets transferred and gets documented appropriately, even though the mob may or may not be intact.
Wow, I heard about chaos engineering, but I've never heard about chaos engineering using at the team level. I'm definitely going to steal that idea because I just love it. Yeah, but in reality, these things happen unplanned, and if you bring it in, you make sure people have to deal with that and have to prepare for it because they know. Then they know that it's going to happen, even if in other situations it's also going to happen, but they just don't prepare for it. So I really like that concept.
Yeah, and it's also true on the more micro level. So yeah, like someone being away for a long time, or let's say, leaving an organization, going somewhere else. That's more. But also like, a package was just delivered, or a contractor just got here. You just walk away. It's courteous to let your team know, but it's almost like you don't even need to because the mob will just keep flowing. And then when you come back, you can either slowly acclimate in or interject and acclimate in, but either way, it can just keep flowing, and there's not really a hard break or a major consequence of that.
I like that. I think the second question we still haven't had only about one answer. Am I correct? About not being doing an IT. Did both of you already have the answer? Or
we did?
Okay, sorry. I need to keep track of it. So this conversation is going so fluently. So let's move to that third question. What is your biggest challenge, and why is it a good thing? And of course, the biggest challenge that you want to share. There's always things that people prefer not to share publicly online, but.
So the biggest challenge, mob program, things like mob programming and no estimates and things like that. Those things are, I think, difficult for executives to accept, and other people who see it from the outside. There's these 4 high-paid people all working at the same computer at the same time on the same thing. How is that? How is that faster than doing that by themselves? And so, I think it's an ongoing thing, and we've invented a lot of ways of communicating outside of our group to make sure that people are on board with things like this. And so, but I think there's always either turnover at that level or somebody new that gets introduced into it. And so, I think one thing I spend a lot of my time on is just, kind of advocating outside of the group for making sure that that the benefits and of doing things this way is well understood. both at a financial level and at a interpersonal and corporate level as well. So, that's spent a lot of my time on that, and I think we've been very successful. We've been kind of mob programming without doing any sort of estimation for over a decade now. And we went from a team of 5 people, and we're now a team of about 30 people. And
when you say a team, people mobbing all 30 together, or you mean in different groups, or how should I see it?
So maybe I'll take a page out of Heidi Halfen's dynamic reteaming. So we have allocated budgets per product, and people can self-organize within those budgetary constraints. So okay. That typically manifests into pairs, between pairs, which is very rare, but usually 3 to 5 people mobs, depending on where you're at.
And like you say, people can move around, and you actually make sure that people move around so that the knowledge is spread. And in that sense, your knowledge is not just spread to one team, but it's basically spread to the whole group of people who are working in one way.
And so there's a hard restriction of you must move if you've been somewhere for 2 years on the same product. But there are experiments right now going on with essentially daily moving. So kind of emulating the promiscuous pairing from the Joy Inc. Menlo Innovation style, all the way to just having that mob, be static for a couple of years until somebody leaves, and having kind of a regular flow rotation. And I have other ideas for experiments, and other people on the team do as well. And so we try and provide space for those experiments to be run. But the one thing that I think we saw problems with was if we saw that there was a kind of an unconscious dependence forming that led to some, kind of maybe general inequities when people had been staying on a product for 5-6 years. They kind of became the de facto questions person rather than documenting and having things appropriately automated. And so that's where that we modeled the rule off of the American capital gains tax laws. So no one can stay on the same product for more than 2 years out of the last 3 years. And that's the same for selling a home. If you sell your home, you get capital gains tax if you've lived in the house for 3 years out of the last 5 years. So that was kind of where the idea came from, and it's working quite well.
Okay. I really like that idea, because indeed we try to, or I think it's a bad idea if that knowledge is too much in one thing. There seems to be a lot of attention into companies. Yeah, we should keep everyone, and this person should, and people should stay on their team. And I think it's actually the opposite. We should encourage people to move around and just be ready for it, and make sure that we have all that knowledge. And if you're not ready for it, then I agree, then there is a problem and people are moving.
A key metric that I've begun to keep is just turnover rate, and being prepared for that. I think a lot of people, when they make budgets, especially like at a very high level, if you're budgeting for the year or quarterly budgets or whatever you might do at your company, when you're doing the budgets, I think a lot of people don't assume that there will be turnover in those budgets. And so I think one thing that now, goes into it is I factor in the last 2 years worth of turnover rate. And so and then budget explicitly for a similar level of turnover. And that's been an interesting practice, because it's like, oh, why did your budget in this area go up? It's like, well, we experience this amount of turnover every year, so we will need to do these things to deal with that turnover. And that's been beneficial to the discussion for sure.
And even in the environment where you do a lot of mobbing and there's still a turnover, and is that then related to mobbing, or is that more like, okay, people want to move on in their career or family things, or is that, or do you don't?
Yeah, Yeah, so I'll say it's a little bit of both. So there's the money aspect. So people become very valuable in our environment very quickly. I would say faster than anywhere else. So if you're a junior developer and you're mobbing with senior level developers, your value skyrockets. And so I think any company, any company's leader, recognizes that scaling that at a rate that matches what the market would value them at is very difficult to do. And then beyond that, I think that there are just other situations where people are moving on in their life or whatever. So there's a statistic that was told to me by a previous boss, and so it basically says that every 5 years, somebody has a life-changing event. They get a big surgery, a loved one passes away, they all the way to some big career opportunity outside. So we've had developers go on to become VPs of engineering at other companies. We've had people leave for whatever other reason, and also retirement, people retiring out of the system as well. So there is always going to be turnover. You should always assume turnover, and whatever that turnover rate might be. We for the last 7 years we've been measuring developer happiness. And so basically we do kind of quarterly charts for everyone's happiness, and then we aggregate them and kind of show it to the group. And so we kind of look for average levels of happiness across the entire department for people on the team and things like that. So we have a pretty good idea of when people leave and why they left. I also keep a spreadsheet called market competition, and that market competition spreadsheet is like what they told me on their way out for what they left for, and why, and all this other stuff. And that has helped tremendously in negotiations with the corporate level for salary ranges and things like that.
Yeah, I want to jump a little part, and then we go to you, Austin, because we've been talking for a long time. But it's what you said about the 5 year, the big events. I know I had a conversation with the late Jerry Weinberg, who said something similar. He said basically every 7 years you have to renegotiate everything you do, every negotiation or every agreement you have with your partner, because he says every 7 years your life has completely changed. That even, and he gave examples of who's doing the dishes, because it changed, and that it was interesting to see that, and it really made me think about that. What do I look for, and is my life the same? And for me, it's like it's kind of similar. Am I still in the same kind of industry after 5 years and stuff like that? I see a lot of similarities there, so I can definitely agree. And that's for me, not even counting on big changes. Having children growing up, leaving the house, stuff like that. That's just huge things there as well. So thank you for talking about that, Chris, because indeed I think it's good to think about that, and that's why I wanted to know if the turnover was related to some of that. So it's good to track these kind of things.
So a good metric, I think, actually, for leaders in software right now is the total number of people on your team divided by 5, the 5-year mark, and that's the number of people that are going to have major events in your team. So is your turnover over or under that number? And because I think somebody who's doing well, and I struggled with this a lot. But so I think somebody who's doing well in a position like that shouldn't beat themselves up over a turnover rate that is similar to that 5-year number. So because there's just so much that will change, either people move away or have other reasons to be outside the company than that. So really, it's like if your turnover rate is above that rate, then that might be something for deeper inspection. But yeah, that was a thought.
Yeah, I like that idea. It's also related, and you mentioned Heidi, her work earlier on. I think there is a lot there that we see. I've actually had one team that I worked 10 years ago with, and in the last 3 years, nobody had moved on. So basically, that team was completely stable. And what I've learned from that situation, and it took me 6 months to learn it, is that that was not healthy either. It was completely unhealthy. I mean, in Agile, we always say we want to keep the team stable, but we want to keep the team as stable as possible in the conditions that Chris is talking about, because everything is happening. And if it's completely stable, nobody's moving on, everything was completely the same for 2, 3 years, then it became unhealthy because there wasn't a lot of the things that you earlier talked about, knowledge in one head and stuff like that, and people being afraid to help other teams because then they would leave their team and stuff like that. So yeah, too strict and too stable teams, I learned from that situation, was not good either. And we typically don't have that into IT because of all the things that you talked about. So we don't need to do other stuff to move things around. But it's like you say, if we do that, you work and think a lot more about that. Now, well, let's go to Austin.
Yeah, no, and I think it's the answer to this question probably reflects Chris and I's different perspectives on the work. So he's coming at it from a kind of a leadership perspective, and for me, the biggest struggle has been exploring and understanding the differences of interpersonal interactions and group dynamics and all that kind of stuff. And what's funny, it's been quite a season outside of work of dealing with that similar thing. So what does healthy conflict look like? What does it look like when people are on complete opposite ends of the personality spectrum? What does it look like for them to work well together? What are the different styles of teaming or mob programming? That you can have a style that's very, rowdy and fun and debate and argue and try experiments and multiple things going at the same time. And then you can have styles that are very, in sync and, one thing at a time. And, it's a very facilitated, soft discussion, and so I think just after having a certain amount of years of experience of different people and personalities, kind of mapping out the different styles to basically have therapy for myself to understand, like, okay, so this person approaches it this way, this other person approaches it this way. How can we find a way for people to work well together? Because, if people interact a lot on a quote unquote team, in a traditional software team, mob programming is a big amplification of that because it's continuous, or at least a lot more than before. And so, yeah, that's been the challenge that's been fun to discover a lot with.
Yeah. And I really like that you point out that a lot of that discussions or a lot of the troubles or whatever that there is has more to do with the worldview of these people. Of course, if you're looking at whatever first time right and somebody else is much more iterative, the easiest idea that comes to my mind, if the two of these have to work together, if they don't know about that different worldview, then making them collaborate is really hard. So by you understanding that really helps. So yeah, I can definitely see that but that also means that you as a person, Austin, you have to at least understand their knowledge, their worldview. You might not agree with it, but at least you have to understand their worldview. And that's where I think what you said, the therapy for yourself, or the soul searching is there to make sure, do I understand that, and these kind of things. So, yeah. And indeed, that's a completely different kind of challenge than Chris does. But that's of course one of the ways why it's interesting to have both of you here on at the same time. Let's move to that next question. And I think both of you, we have already talked with a lot of passion, a lot of drive. Do you have any idea where that drive is coming from?
You first, Chris.
Yeah. Okay. So I think the de facto answer is my family, right? You got that. I think that from a perspective of, maybe why do I want to expand or constantly Kaizen, the work that I do. I would say that, this kind of became maybe a tagline for our department, but it's kind of like exploring the unexplored potential. I think that there's a lot of maybe potential energy in the way that work is done, that is not that's not being exercised. And so one thing that I really like seeing happen is this potential energy being released. And so, kind of examples of that would be, kind of doing the status quo all the time versus constant experimentation. And you get these kind of small improvements all the time. That's very satisfying to me. I think that, even in my first job where I was kind of just working as like a grocery store clerk, like I would do things where that other people wouldn't, just to slightly improve the situation rather than just doing whatever my job was. And so, while other people kind of just did the same over and over again, you'd see me kind of climbing in the rafters and changing something so that people down below didn't have to do the same process over and over again to deal with it. So exploring that unexplored potential, that very much drives me in the work that I do.
So in improving everything, not just for yourself, and what I like about this is it's also for the people around you.
Yeah, so I will take it either upon myself or I will advocate among a group of people to just try something that might be slightly better. And if it doesn't work out, then it's all good. We'll just go back to the way it was before. But that process of experimentation, I think I personally maybe get a little bit anxious when it's the same thing over and over again. I know that this is one of the reasons why I love software, is because if I ever have to do anything repetitive, I am there's a gradual anxiety that builds into anger eventually. And so the way that I keep my anxiety down and keep myself happy is by automating anything that I have to do repeatedly, or finding a way to make it interesting, like listening to audiobooks or something along those lines. So, people are never going to get away from doing dishes, every day until we have the robotic arms that do all that and we can automate it. But while you're doing dishes, you can learn about other types of automation that you can improve other areas or something like that. Listening to audiobooks while doing the dishes. So those are my two kind of things. But I'm very driven by keeping things dry. Don't repeat yourself.
Yeah, just do it once or twice, and after that, you need to find a way to automate it or do it in a better way and another way. I see a lot of people here that have the exact same thing. That's I think a lot of IT people are there. I think there is also a pitfall in trying to automate too quickly sometimes. But yeah, if you have the right people around you, we can. That doesn't always have to be a problem or become a problem. Austin, what's it for you? What drives you?
Yeah, and I mean, so this is a show on Agile, so I'm not going to try to get too metaphysical here and crazy, but yeah, I mean, definitely, family drives me a lot, and there are deeper things that drive me, but at a certain level, I really strive to help others and kind of bring, in a more classical sense, more goodness, truth, and beauty to wherever I'm at, and that might sound strange, but it's basically just a desire to help and, to make things improve, like Chris is saying. And so I think continuous improvement might be one way to put it, that I just love seeing things improve, like starting here and going here, even if it's only a 1% gain, right? Or setting up a system or setting up a habit where I know that, if the investment keeps happening either for myself or with the team, this thing's gonna get better. So I just kind of love seeing that happen, and that also as we were talking about earlier in the show, tends to be an increase of fun and joy for everyone involved. And so, yeah, I like seeing that process happen.
And do you have any idea where that comes from? Where did you pick that up? That part?
So many things. I think, yeah, I mean, I think the drive for that was definitely modeled in many ways in my life. Whether through church or through God or things like that, I think are a big influence on that. And then also just being with people and seeing them do it, right? And then seeing the result of it. It's just been super inspiring for me personally. And so I think just been fortunate to be alongside people who have modeled it, I think is a big thing. So, yeah.
And so then gradually you pick it up without people even telling you. You just see people doing it. You see people that it improves their life in a way. And then that's what you mean with modeling, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's something there could be deeper reasons for it, more like intellectually, but I think it's almost its own self-reinforcing feedback loop. Like I think in I don't remember the author's name, but in the Grit book, it talks about how things that are hard, why do people who, like an Olympic athlete, for example, it's lots of hours of pain for getting what they achieve, right? But the satisfaction that comes from that is so high that it overcomes the difficulties. And so I think Kaizen or continuous improvement in all areas of life kind of has a self-reinforcing feedback loop that once you see the benefits of it, it's almost like you're almost addicted to it, right?
We had yesterday. I didn't see the full episode, but we had yesterday an Olympic champion, a Belgian Olympic champion on the television, and I saw a clip of it that people talked about the little money that she made. She's a gymnast, and so she basically for the 5 or 7 medals that she had is like €1,000 per medal, because that's about what it is. And even then the taxes still had to come, so it's very little money. And that the example that you give, the Grit, is she does it for all the pleasure, and it's totally not for the money. It's all that other stuff that is there. And I really like the way both of you bring that, because well, in the industry, in the agile industry, we talk a lot about agile mindset, but over the last 2-3 years, I feel like, yes, I believe agile mindset is important, but most of us, and I look at myself, but a lot of other people that have been talked about, we learned it by doing it, and we learned it by having role models around it that have been doing and continues improving, and that learned us so much more than talking about mindset. In the end, it will change our mindset, but it's by doing it, or at least that's how I feel. I don't know if both of you agree or disagree with that.
I'll throw in there that, and I think maybe both Austin and I may have experienced this, but I know I came from an environment where there was just a lot of stuff that I knew could be better, but I maybe didn't necessarily know how at the time. But there was a lot of acceptance of, a very inefficient way of doing things, right? It was just like, oh, well, this is, and so I think it both comes from maybe that forward-looking motivation, but also a motivation not to continue to do the thing that is obviously not efficient. And so I think the whole story about hundreds of bugs before I started where I am now. I also came from an environment where bugs are just kind of accepted all the time, and there's just like a fundamentally different mindset when going into that, and it's been so the motivation both comes from, I think, that continuous improvement, but also I think we've seen things that are just so much worse. and that helps with inspiration for ideas for better. Yeah.
So you're both inspired, or you at least, Chris, you're inspired both by the good examples and the bad examples, because you've seen it in the worst way that you say, oh, it's so inspiring that that's definitely not what I want to do. It's interesting, because we don't always talk about these bad examples, but it's true. It does give an inspiration on okay, that's definitely not the way I want to lead a company, work in a team, or whatever. So and sometimes if it's really bad, it can bring people to like, okay, that's a completely shitty life. Let's see how we can design our life to not go into that direction. Austin, you still had an answer there to that question about mindset and practices, or?
Yeah. And I totally agree with you that it's learning from the good and from the bad. And I think I've heard critiques of, so to speak, agile mindset, and I think the critique is valid if it's taken in isolation, right? So if you just have a very ethereal, let's say, agile mindset, but don't introduce, don't think about technical practices or things like that, that can be bad. So for me, it's always a both and, so that the agile mindset of maybe more of a growth mindset, and the more of the the bare essence of run an experiment, inspect and adapt kind of thing is absolutely essential. And but the implications of that are more than that simple mindset. And so I think there's a lot of nuance and detail there, but it's both. So, and do you want me to reach out to Chris?
Well, I assume that he will jump back, and I will
Okay.
get back. So we can start already with that next
Nice.
question about what do you consider your biggest achievement? And meanwhile, I see that Chris is coming back here. So we just started, or Austin is just going to start with that next question. What's your biggest achievement, Austin?
Oh man! So is this?
This is your moment to brag and to shine, basically. I don't know if it's easy for you, but that's
yeah. No, I guess biggest achievement. I think outside of work is just maybe I'll answer both outside of work and inside of work. So outside of work is probably my family and my kids. There was just a moment last night we were kind of reading books aloud to each other. Like I was reading books aloud to the kids, and they're asking these great questions. We're having this good discussion, and they're sharing their passions, and just that whole setup and environment is so great. And so I'm not exactly sure how I got here, but that's feel really fortunate for that quote unquote achievement, and just everything my wife share. As far as at work, I think I would say there have been, I think, teams where everything is just flowing really, really well. So, and I think, I don't know if the exact scientific model to put on it, like there's like the Satir change model, and then there's just storming, forming, norming. But there's this phase where teams break through their kind of personality differences and whatever differences of opinion they have, or they keep their difference of opinion, but they start sharing them freely, and you have that high psychological safety, and just where people are getting along really well. The quality of the product is high. We're releasing often, and I've just been on a few teams that have been that way, and it's always just such a joy. So yeah, a few stretches of time come to mind, including the current mob I'm on right now. I would say is definitely in that mode, and so I would say those experiences are up there for me.
It's interesting that you say you have been in a few of these teams, and I want to stress it out because we just talked about bad examples and bad companies. I know so many companies that say, yeah, but that's an ideal situation and you cannot reach it. And then there's people like you, Austin, that have been there constantly in a few places, and maybe not always that good, but you have had multiple experiences. And I think that's important to stress, because it means that a lot of what you're doing is helping out to create these environments. We've been talking in the beginning already a little bit about some of the things that both of you are doing with mobbing and stuff like that. So it's really important that people understand that, yes, there is ways to help reach these kind of ways. And if people want to know more, then they definitely have to follow your show to have more more learning about how that is working. But I really like that. And of course, yeah, the family. I've been thinking about for a while to say, well, achievement except for family, because that's the first thing that people bring up. But I really like the extra part that you bring in, the part that you say, okay, how the children are asking questions, how they're, so it's not just raising children, and it's also about some part of that achievement. So thank you for adding that little touch in there, because I do think, of course, for most of us, what the biggest achievement that we have is indeed what we do with our families, and that's more important than work anyway. Chris, how is it for you?
Yeah, so very similar with the family answer. I think psychological safety is a good thing to talk about here. I think that, I believe that over, the last decade or so, I've been able to kind of work in and help create a psychologically safe environment that can regularly improve and do that. And so kind of, from that moment that I started working with Woody Zuhl went on to then kind of go and lead that team. I think that, there's a lot of great things that have come out of that. I've really liked doing the kind of international speaking stuff. And I've also, just having the opportunity to kind of build up a team and work with that team and have a self-organizing, psychologically safe team of people that can work together and accomplish great things together. Delightful to me. So I don't know if that's an achievement so much as like a series of opportunities lined up by circumstances surrounding me, but yeah, I really enjoy it.
Well, I do think it's an achievement, and a little bit like what I said to Austin before, if you can create kind of environments where it's psychological safe. I think all of us and a lot of people here that were watching the show will have seen not psychological safe places, and it is not easy to create it. And I like what you said, or I link it also what you said, Chris, earlier on about talking to management and other people in the company to make sure that they understand some of the ways on how you do it. So that is part of, for me, on how you create these kind of situations, that people are aware about some of that stuff. And okay, maybe it's not something where you will get an award for or an Oscar or whatever, talking about acting, but it's definitely something that is an achievement. This is also why I like to ask this question on the show, because everybody has different kind of achievement, and for some people it's an award, and for some people it's these kind of things. So I really like that diversity and these answers, and for me it's definitely something that you can be proud of. And so that's definitely something to talk about. Okay, let's move to that next question. Do you have a personal agility tip to share?
Yeah, I think for me, this is one I'm thinking of sharing at our next. Our department does monthly lightning talks where I have opportunity to share, and so one is I'm thinking of titling it "The World Is My Kanban," and basically I love using. If the people you live with can tolerate it, love using stickies positionally. So as I'm sitting right here, I have stickies under my keyboard, and then I have stickies off to the right, and the different space they're on means different things. So off to my right, I have some stickies that are reminders of things to ask the team when I join that mob again and here in a little bit. And then stickies under my keyboard are, administrative items I'm trying to tackle. And then stickies next to a certain part of my laptop are for things I need to do after work is over that I need to remember to do. And so I'll do a lot of things like that. And for me, it helps with, establishing.
And so wait, I want to go a little bit into that, because that means that I just remember it's interesting. I get a flashback to a cleaning person that was helping my parents, and she was when she would clean my room, stickies like that would be moved all around because it was like, yeah, but this is just stickies. It's like, no, things are in a certain position for certain reasons. I don't know if that happens to you sometimes, that people move things around and that you're like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is if we're having people over, the stickies have to be hidden, right? Because then that's embarrassing to it's an outsider. No, yeah. So there are ways to hide them, but there have been times where someone did clean and stickies were moved around. But basically, it was the pile of the backlog that I probably never to look at again. So it was okay that they got moved somewhere else.
You could throw it away.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you say the stickies have to be moved. I've actually worked with a CEO that had a Kanban board in his room, so a large room, but it was behind. It was on the wall, but he could drop a projector screen. So whenever he had customers around, that projector screen was down, so he could project something. But the main reason was to hide the post-its. So.
Nice. Yeah,
it's interesting that you mentioned that kind of thing. So yeah, I don't mind that things are somewhere around there, but I do know that a lot of people mind when it looks too untidy because of stickies and whatever. So I definitely get that part. So Chris, how is it for you? Do you have any tip to
Yeah, so this is like agility tips for your personal life, or is that?
I on purpose don't make a difference because it brings different kind of diversity. So Austin moved it in that kind of direction. You can move it in another direction if you want.
Well, maybe I'll just say that paying attention to habits and Can you hear me again?
Hi. Now I can hear you back. So
sorry about that.
You were just starting to answer the question.
Yes. I think a combination of good atomic habits, like in the book Atomic Habits, and the virtuous loop, this idea of retrospectives combined with learning sessions, or some level of learning. The combination of those things, I think, can lead to great things. And so I suggest to people, don't try and be the best agile organization or don't do this, don't try to accomplish some big thing right away. And instead just work on, a combination of good habits, a inspection process, a Kaizen process, and a way for you to get new ideas. So for my family, that might be reading parenting books and then regularly evaluating my habits at home to try and create better habits or a better habit loop. And in the office is the same thing. It's how does the team learn? How do we inspect and adapt? And so, if you're just doing retrospectives, incorporate learning sessions, because your retrospectives will reach a ceiling because you're not getting any new ideas. And so these are the types of things that I would suggest. That's my personal tip. So, have a set of habits, including the virtuous loop, that will slowly get you to better. And I think paying less attention to, those large goals that you're working toward, because there's a lot of anxiety in those too. So.
Yeah, I sometimes say to people, don't use a waterfallish process to start an agile way of working, in the sense that let's not do big bang and on improvement. Even if the idea and the improvements are good, first of all, it's impossible for people to absorb everything. And you don't learn them, like you say, the atomic habits that are needed to because then even if that would be a better process, then they were stuck with that better process for the next whatever years until there's another big chunk coming up. No, that's not how we want to do it. I want to keep it, and they have to come up. People have to come up with their own better ideas, not just you, because otherwise you, Chris, are the bottleneck for all the big improvement ideas. That's not going to work either. And then it means you cannot go on holidays at moments that they want to improve, which is also not what you want.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Okay, let's move into that next question, and it's a similar kind of thing about tips. Do you have any tips about remote working? Well, maybe let's first start. Did both of you work already remote before COVID, for example? Was that something you were? I think so, but I wasn't sure, so that's why I'm asking.
And not really.
Yeah, no, I was almost always in person before COVID, and now we're both fully remote. So it's a big transition, and at least for me, I don't know if I could ever go back. I love remote so much. So I mean, there's of course nuance and exception to that, but I guess it's maybe just excitement about how awesome remote mod programming has been, and so. Yeah, and I think as far as tips for me, I mean, is to experiment with any remote tools that help synchronous work where synchronous work makes sense, right? And I think in essence, that's a lot of what mob programming or ensemble work is that, any system that has waiting and queuing and, anything like that can really slow it down. And you're working remotely to experiment with tools that allow the whole system to be in the room and for it to get done right away, right? So that could be as simple as a video call like we're doing now and a shared screen. And if you're doing higher forms of collaboration, it might include, a more sophisticated tool like a Git handover tool for mobbing or AnyDesk or TeamViewer or something like that, where or shared drawing space or remote sticky space or any of these kind of tools where you go from I write something and then a day later I hear back to I say something and get feedback now, or I have an idea and I draw it and then someone else draws their idea and we realize we have different ideas. And it would have taken us, days over text to figure that out, and so.
So wait, because I really like that. So instead of just drawing it visually, you both draw it separately, and then you compare notes or drawings. Is that what I'm hearing? Is that
Chris has more experience with that. For me, it's almost like we draw it together. That, but I've also seen it work with you draw separately. But yeah.
Yeah. So one of the developers in our department. Was asking me one day, like, oh, everybody seems to have like vastly different skill levels, but it's not super apparent. And so like one thing that kind of came out of that was like a draw separately and then compare. And then basically people were learning from each other for details that they didn't find. So yeah, both situations are good. I think it just depends on where you're going with it, but or even getting people to kind of speak up. So some of these like micro kind of mob programming things, and this was even in person, but I've seen it done remotely as well. But it's this idea of everybody draws and then compare afterwards. That I think is a process for maximizing learning, because people often learn by seeing that they're wrong. And I think that when people are working in a mob, sometimes when they draw together, it's like everyone's idea all at the same time. And so that learning, one of the developers on our team refers to it as learning theft. It's this idea that somebody with that knowledge kind of just blurted it out, and now the people that might have learned from a mistake won't get that learning. And
I really like that you stress that part, because these are two different kind of things. I think it's really important. It reminds me of some of the things. My father, like I said, he used to be in IT in the very beginning, and he used to do something. And he thought in the beginning, when he heard about pair programming, he thought that was it. He actually was programming something, and one of his colleagues was programming the exact same thing at the exact same moment. And every hour they would grab a coffee together and discuss what they had programmed. And so then they would both move on, and maybe they would copy the code from the other person and then move on from there, or maybe they would keep working on it. And so I really like that idea that sometimes it's good to just think on your own and then compare notes. And doing it with a drawing, it never occurred to me that you could even do that at that level. So it's really interesting.
If 4 people in a mob all do a UML diagram of the thing that they just agreed to write, like, will it be the same? And that's almost never true, right? So it's even the verbal communication can be helped by pictures. But anyway, Austin, you were saying.
Oh no, that's it. And then basically the tip is I like shout out to Alex Bird, where he talked about taking anything that's having that problem of not type feedback loop, and just make a a slight suggestion, like, oh, if you're having a meeting and it's like, oh, let's go do these 2 things separately, and you can just kind of see the cues building up, just be like, oh, maybe can you share your screen, and I'd like to see what you have in mind for that right now, or, oh, let's look at the code, you know what I mean? And just a slight suggestion like that. Or while someone's talking, just share your screen and start looking at it together. You can often remotely speed up those feedback loops. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Okay, Chris, up to you. Do you have something extra there?
Yeah, I share the same sentiment largely, and one thing I would add is this idea that so a lot of people kind of at the corporate level ask me, like, oh, well, is in person or remote better for you? And when I was looking at it, I saw like a lot of the advocacy for in person maybe was coming from like specifically from like maybe more extroverted people that really just wanted to have that interpersonal interaction. And so like one thing I looked at was like, okay, well, what are the queuing times? What is the lean effect here? How are we lean, or are we more lean or less lean? And so we did, I think before COVID, we had a big culture of in person. And so what we would have is we'd have a product owner walking by the building, and he'd be walking from the marketing building and walking over to our engineering building, but he'd be passing by the software development building, and you'd literally see software developers walk up from their seats and be like, oh no, the product owner is going over to the hardware building, and so it's like, oh, we'll never get our question answered, or it'll be a long time before we get our question answered. And so when our product owners stopped walking around the offices as much, the culture, because they were remote for COVID related reasons, and the phone call became much more culturally prevalent, and or mobbing with that product owner. I would say that the team eliminated many of the queues for certain products, and in that just more direct and immediate collaboration with product owners. And so I would say, when you're evaluating remote versus in person, don't, while the social cues and interpersonal cues are much better in person, I would say consider reevaluating remote from the perspective of lean, because I would say that our teams now are much more effective than we were not in person. And some of that was just the org structure and how our product owners exist within the marketing department. But I think it's really important for those sorts of evaluations to take into account the lean side of things, and not just this advocacy around interpersonal interactions being a little bit higher for the fidelity than on video. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah.
I feel pretty passionate.
And I want to stress also the thing that you said in the beginning about introverts and extroverts is, yes, the most people who are advocating for the in-person or the extroverts who really like that, but the introverts, and it's not that all introverts prefer to stay at home, because I know a lot of introverts, and even here on the show, people have said that. I recognize that for me as an introvert, I really like to see people from time to time. So they were surprised sometimes, but still, being around in an office with a lot of extroverts and loud-mouthed extroverts sometimes is for introverts not always that best way to bring the best of you. And so then it can be really good, and understanding that dynamic and where it's coming from, and understanding also that the people who are speaking up the most, who are the extroverts, are the ones who are asking for going back to the office. Doesn't mean that everybody wants it. It's just that it means that the people you hear are the people who like to talk most. So that gives us a good idea.
Yeah, and also it's I think importantly, it's, you should evaluate the financial impact of it through the lens of lean. I think I think that when you're looking at so people are saying, oh well, we'll make better decisions because we can read body language. I think often that might be a misconception with like how much influence body language has on technical work. And it's
not even true. There is a really good book. I can't come up with the name. I'll put it in the show notes. But there is a really good book that I read last year that really says that most people overestimate how good they can read body language. It's really, and it's something we've been talked a lot about the show. There's actually a person here who talked, someone from South Africa, that said that I had to use different cues for body language at home than at school, because at school I had to. I don't remember which was it, but in one situation she had to look up to the person to say, "Look, this is I'm listening to what you say," and in the other situation she had to look down because people were expecting her to look down to say, "Okay, I'm hearing you when you're reprimanding me," and so. It's the same exact situation, the same person in the same day, two different kind of situations. So body language, you really have to be very careful if you just read it.
So the lens of lean is make those evaluations through the lens of lean, and also measure the impacts to the personal lives of the people, because we had people doing 2-hour commutes to get to the job, and while they were the ones who signed up for a job like that, I think that you're going to get better quality work when somebody has a few extra hours in their personal life available to them. And so that's another thing is the cumulative. What is the total commute that you'd be eliminating by staying remote versus going in person is another big thing to pay attention.
Yeah, and not just the time, and also the energy, because of course you have to be 2 hours in the car or in the train or whatever. You're almost I'm dreaded when I come out of the car after 2 hours. So I would need another hour or so before I have energy again. So that might also be more time that we're losing. So that's definitely not helping. Okay, let's move to. I think we both of you have answered this question. So let's move to that next question about a book. What's a book that you have read that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, oh man, I've been reading so many different books.
And we mentioned already quite a few books, but
yeah. Ancient or contemporary. So I recently read. Thinking Fast and Slow. I'm reading the book about grit right now, and I can give follow up with links in the show notes. Another one that I'm reading that's very on point for what we've talked a lot about today is Woody Zuhl's book on mob programming, and I've been reading through that and then sharing as I read, nuggets of wisdom that I pull out of it. But I think I want to emphasize that one just because.
That's the book that I think you mean, eh?
Yeah,
or is it
exactly, yeah. And I think he has a new edition coming out, or that just came out as well. And but yeah, and I think I want to highlight that because I think mob programming or ensembling or teaming in that way, so many of the good things we've been talking about just start to happen naturally in a very human sort of way without. Force or any of that kind of stuff. And so I think a lot of good stuff is wrapped up in that. And so, yeah, I think that's what I would like to share about.
Yeah, and I think we mentioned Woody already before, and there's a lot of good knowledge there in that book. So yeah, I could definitely see that coming. That one of you would bring that book up. Okay, Chris, what's a book you want to talk about?
Yeah. So, I think a lot of the reading material that I've gone through is going to be very similar. So maybe I'll give one a little bit more out of left field here. There's a book by Jane McGonigal called "Reality is Broken." Why games make us better and how they can solve real world problems. It's a very interesting book on game design and the theory around it, and then also related to aspects of her personal life, and then impacts that those things have had, and then also games for good and things along those lines. But if you want a
and when you mean games, so it's not per definition computer games, It's
in this book it is computer games.
Okay.
This is the industry she worked in, but it has a lot of applications, I think, to incentives and things like that we deal with in. Especially when you talk about like Dora metrics and making those things visible. So it's definitely a good book that will maybe give a perspective on things that is maybe not inside the normal books that you might get on the show. So that's why I want to recommend it. It's a pretty interesting thing on game design, game theory sort of stuff.
So even if you are not in the game development industry, you still read books about it and you learn from it. Like you said earlier on, you try to lead it. And when you mentioned Dora metrics, you mean the thing. If people want to learn more, I think Accelerate is a good book to learn more about these metrics as well. I think that's another good book that you kind of side noted talked about it. So thank you for bringing these up. I think it's I think these are wonderful ways of looking at books and different kind of things. So let's move to that next question that for me is one of the more interesting questions. That is there a question that I didn't ask that I should ask you, and what's it? Is it? And if you want, we can actually play the game that you can ask the question to your colleague if you don't want to answer yourself. So that might be one we can do as well. But you can. That's up to you, both of you.
Chris, you got anything? I'm pondering and struggling a bit.
Austin, what is your best tip for somebody who is coaching a team?
Good one. I think is for every coach to get a good coach of them. So coach of the coach. Because I think we all need feedback. And I think coaching a team, especially when you're first joining it, can be a roller coaster, right? You could be observing 1,000 things and you could be tempted to critique 1,000 things, or, so there's a lot to process, at least for me. And so having someone to meet with on occasion and, share the situation and ask for advice and get feedback on it, and kind of getting wise counsel, so to speak, on how to coach, I think is a great first step. And it can be, more of an official mentoring relationship, or it can literally be someone who will give you honest feedback, and just scheduling a meeting with them and just being like, hey, I'd like some advice on things that are going on, to get an outside perspective or just help. And then that's
a really it's I love that answer, because it's amazing how many coaches don't have a coach themselves, or either never had a coach themselves, and just having the experience of being coached is already good for being a better coach. because sometimes people coach people and then they don't understand why it's so frustrating for the coachee. Well, if you ever would be in a coachee situation, you would understand that sometimes feedback, even if you like feedback, it doesn't mean that it can't hurt sometimes. I mean, you can learn a lot from feedback that sometimes even hurts. And yeah, of course, we should use it in clean language and whatever to make it not less hurting. But sometimes really good feedback still hurts a little bit. So just being a coachee yourself is already helpful to understand that part. So that's why, that's another part of why I like your answer so much. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, thanks. That's great. That's great. And I think to turn it back on Chris would be, if you're a leader and you find yourself in an organization, let's just be really dramatic, so take all the worst experiences you've ever had in your work life, Chris, and say that this leader is in that spot. What would be the first couple moves you'd suggest to someone in such a place?
Yeah. There's situations. So like one thing is, in an environment I was in, a colleague who I considered a friend and I were both promoted at the same time. And then our boss started comparing us to each other, like, oh, why can't you be like him? And so this person immediately became very hostile toward me. And so, that might be,
And with the person, you mean your friend and not the boss.
Yeah, my friend. So the boss was happy with my work and not happy with his, and was immediately, pitting us against each other, sort of thing. The one thing that I would do today that I didn't do back then, because I don't think I was knowledgeable enough in this, is I would actually give my boss feedback about his behaviors. And one thing I would tell myself back then would be situation, behavior, impact, sort of feedback. To talk about the financial impacts that he was having on the company by pitting us against each other. And so I think getting good at the SBI feedback model and really practicing it all the time, and then having those crucial conversations that, if you've ever read that book, Crucial Conversations talks a lot about how to make those uncomfortable discussions happen. And so, it's modeling psychological safety, before it exists in a company. And so that's where I would go with that. If you're in a really bad spot, turning up the level of psychological safety to an uncomfortable degree, I think is the best gambit in that situation. And the worst thing is that can happen is you end up somewhere else, right? But yeah, I think that would be the approach I would take today.
And interestingly enough, at this point, what the situation that you're describing, your boss was happy about you, so he probably would have listened much more to you than to your friend who was actually having the problems. And so, if the person, his favorite son or his favorite student or whatever you call it, is giving you the feedback like, yeah, okay, but what you're doing is not helping neither me, neither my friend, neither the company. That might be, he might be ready to listen to you. He probably would have never listened to your friend because somehow your friend was already looked negative from that side. So thank you for sharing, because
there's a tremendous amount of stress that he was under, and so I wouldn't I would just suggest that sort of behavior is not good in general, but and I don't think any of it was his fault. It was all situational. So it's just this idea of like, frequent early feedback and very direct, and don't hold these things back. I think too many people need to be polite or need to be, but situation, behavior, impact allows you to do that at the same time as maybe hopefully disarming the situation while still circulating that feedback. So that's why I like that feedback a lot, that model.
And thank you for also sharing that you were not able to do that at the time, because sometimes people we look at that, and this person is really good, and Chris, you're good at that feedback. Yeah, but I've learned it along the way, and some years ago, even if I was doing good things because my boss was happy about it, I still failed in giving him feedback and doing that. So that's also nice modeling that you're doing, sharing that part.
Yeah,
So
all of
thank
my
you for doing
success
that.
is built on a mountain of failures.
That's but that I like the phrase that experience is just a nice name of past failures. That's basically what it is. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, let's move on to that next question, or that last question. Who do you think I should ask next?
Yeah. So many good ones I could suggest. It's overwhelming actually, but I think Woody Zool is one that comes to mind, or Joe Justice is another
So
one.
Woody is this person.
yeah.
We already talked a little bit about it, and where is my mouse pointer? And you talked also about Joe Justice, which is this person, which is I don't know if it's CEO or founder of Wikispeed, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And I think he his discovery of ensembling or mobbing, just the way he shares about it and the passion he has is for me very winsome and fun. And so I think he'd be fun to have on the show, and also just things he's learned from working at places like Tesla and things like that, and agility. And so I might have stole one of yours accidentally, Chris. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, what I wanted to add a little bit about well, maybe let's show the picture again. The car that is here is a car that was actually assembled at an agile conference in a week, I think. I wasn't there. That's one of the years I didn't go there, and I still regret it, because it would have been a fun project to do. Having lots of people have totally, or most of them, totally no experience with physical building things, building or assembling or creating together a car. Of course, just with pre fit stuff and like that, but still changes, and that's I like that, use that example a lot to show to people, like, okay, we're talking not just about software, but this is also doing what Joe has done is a lot with hardware, and he was so good that people at Tesla even invited him to ask and learn from him, and use some of that stuff there. So yeah, Austin, you probably stole some people, because that these are the two names I got up front. So so Chris, who's the person you want to invite?
Yeah, so I'd highly recommend Colleen Kirtland. So she's very interested in biomimicry and agile teams, and she'd be a great addition. Also, Mike Clement. So he's had a lot of involvement in mobbing teams, and we've done developer exchanges with his teams in the past, and so I think he has a lot of expertise to draw from as well. And they would be great guests for the show.
I don't have the pictures for them prepared, but definitely we'll add the links to the show notes to these people, and of course when this show goes live, I'll invite them for the next part. So this has been a really fun time talking to both of you. If people want to reach out to you, what would be a good way to connect with you?
Yeah, for me, our handle on Twitter, mob__mentality, and then LinkedIn is a good spot for me. And how about you, Chris?
LinkedIn, that's this one, I think. Yeah, is this correct?
Yes. Yeah.
I don't think Chris has a LinkedIn account, so that
I don't. Twitter, it's at Christoph Lucian, and then I'm also very active on YouTube, so if you message me on YouTube as well.
And I think that's the link for both to your YouTube channel. Is that the correct link? I didn't prepare Twitter, to be honest, because these days it's totally unclear what Twitter will happen in the next couple of weeks or months. So that's why I didn't prepare Twitter handles anymore. Yeah, sorry for that.
I'm on Mastodon at REV0, but I'm looking at my potential Mastodon link later, so it'll probably be something with a similar Chris Lucian again as well.
There is actually, for the people who don't know it yet, the Agile Alliance has started to create a Mastodon server as well, which is where people can find some more. It's just in the startup phase because I asked them about it and they just have started it recently, just as a kind of experiment. Could that work? So they're not allowing tons of people there. But the goal is to experiment a little bit, just like a lot of the things that we discussed earlier on.
If that server goes up, then I'll probably be there.
Well, the server is already up because I have an account there, so I can give you context there if you want more.
Thank you. I'd appreciate it.
Okay, well, thank you both of you for your time. It's been a wonderful time, and like I said in our preparation, it probably was not able to do that in 1 hour, but we're still able to do it in less than 2 hours. So, which is for me an achievement to do it with two guests, because we had a lot of interesting answers where I really wanted to dive in a little bit deeper. So thank you. It's been a wonderful moment.
And for us, a lot of great learning. Thank you so much for this conversation. Yeah.
Yep. Have a good one, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Well, bye-bye. Thank you for watching Who's Agile, where the stories of agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other agilists.